Welcome to another episode of Well To Do. I'm Andi Lew, and for the first time, I think in a very long time, I'm doing this podcast on my own. I had a lot of feedback from lots of the audience, the viewers, the listeners. You've been watching for over 30-something episodes now. And a lot of people are telling me that they want to hear more about my wisdom, what I've got to share, rather than interviewing all of the experts. And the last time I did a podcast like this on my own was just before I was about to remove my breast implants. It was something that I felt was very important to share alone. And in that moment, that was one of my first episodes, and it was really quite an emotional time. In that time, I look back and I was like, wow, that was probably one of the most powerful episodes I've ever done. So right now, I'm taking your advice from the feedback and delivering exactly what you need, because you've asked to hear about why I don't age much. And this is, I guess, something that I have been known for with my wellness coaching programs, becoming ageless, in the books that I've written. And let's just yell out my age, because most women aren't proud of their age. And I want to create a culture where women can actually start to say, you know what, I'm 70, I'm this, I'm that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm 52. And in this moment, when I share it to people who haven't heard it before or seen me say it, they will probably go, wow, I thought you were like 15 years younger. You know what, 10 years younger, maybe I'll take it. But in this notion, I want you to remember that as a wellness expert, I've done everything that I can naturally to slow the aging process. And over 3 professional decades of teaching and living what I teach, this is evidence. So in this moment, I want you to take absolute note, as for the first time ever, I share my aging secrets. Now, most of the time, you'll only be privy to this information when you sign up for wellness coaching, or if you sit and devour an entire book, perhaps the one Connected, A Paradigm Shift in How We View Health. And that shift has become an absolute wellness revolution that we are right in the middle of right now. We've got movements like Make America Healthy Again, and even Australia are latching onto that. But you know, America has been one of the unhealthiest countries in the world right now. The CDC had reported that I think it was something like 76% of Americans had a chronic disease. That's just shocking and astounding, because in 1950 or so, it was about 3%. So what is it about chronic illness, and why are we so inflamed? You know, we can talk about it as being overweight or having some kind of neurological illness or an immune system dysfunction. Cancer is on the rise, and a lot of injury from medicine, believe it or not. Now, before we shun medicine and the science and how far we've come with life-saving medical, intervention, where would we be without it? We have to understand this paradigm shift, that we have allopathy and wellness, and they are 2 very different models of healthcare. When you understand this paradigm shift and what you've been going to the doctor for, you'll start to actually, A, understand how your body works to heal and give it the right environment to do so, and B, start to work with the healthcare practitioners of choice in the area that they're experts in. And most of the time, we've been going to a general practitioner or a regular medical doctor to take our well-being to another level, not realizing that their area of training is to treat illness or disease through a drug. Now, only recently did the Secretary of Health, RFK Jr., or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in America has, made it important and has created a new rule that if you are a medical doctor in America, you must study nutrition. Just take that notion and just listen to that for a moment. Shouldn't it have been normal for doctors to educate us on nutrition? It hasn't been, and that's okay. their main area of training is to treat, diagnose, and prescribe medication or a drug. Now, whilst this is important, and full disclaimer here, I'm not giving you medical advice. If you do have chronic illness, I will highly suggest you work with your medical doctor or health practitioner of choice. But what I will acknowledge is that it's important to understand that this is their area of training. It's not in their area of training to really delve deep into nutrition, into, the root cause and prevention of disease. Now, some medical doctors, since especially 2020, have started to come out of the woodwork and really dive deep into holistic practice. Prior to that, you did have integrative medical doctors who really understood this notion. But the point to this is that the doctor that you should be working with should have your best interest in getting you off a drug. You can't stay on a drug forever. Now, the reason why we're talking about this is because allopathy, or the medical model, is a very mechanistic approach. It acknowledges that if there is some kind of a symptom, that it is viewed as a problem and we need to silence the symptom with a drug or medication and just view that symptom in a very mechanistic way, that it's not connected to anything else. Now, on the other hand, the wellness approach, or the holistic model of health, is understanding that everything is connected. It's actually proactive as opposed to the allopathic model being reactive. And it is holistic in its approach instead of the allopathic model being mechanistic. Why is this important? Because the knee bone is connected to the thigh bone, is connected to the rest. Everything is connected, hence the title of one of my best-selling books, Connected, A Paradigm Shift in How We View Health. Now, when we acknowledge that, we start to work with the root cause of the issue and realize that symptoms really are a sign. The symptoms are the solution. And so let's say if we got a rash on our body and we took some sort of cortisone steroidal cream or whatever and we put it on and just hope that we push the rash back in. The body's innate intelligence to sometimes heal is through expulsion. So expelling something toxic through an orifice. We know that when we sneeze or when we cough, we're expelling particles through the nose and the mouth. If we've eaten rotten food, it might come out of that way or down the other end. And so too, an orifice is the pores of the skin. And so sometimes when we get rashes, it's because the body's actually wanting to expel something through the orifice. That's its way of healing. And it's quite miraculous. And the more we learn about how the body works to heal and we think we know it all, the actual less we know. Because the body really is miraculous at healing when you give it the right environment. Where is the evidence of this? We all know that if we get a paper cut, that cut heals on its own. You don't need to put any stitches in it. You don't need a, acupuncture. We don't need, it has the cells that start to know how to bind and heal. Now, of course, we're not talking about life-saving medicine here. We're talking about general health and wellness. Most of the time, it doesn't need intervention. And why is this important? Because every time you take a medication and every time you take a drug, you're actually destroying the microbiome, the health of the gut. Now, we've all learnt about that mind-body connection with the health of the gut. And I'm not just talking about destroying the flora and fauna, so the probiotics and the bacteria. I'm talking about not just replacing that flora and fauna, but actually repairing the lining of the gut, that tissue. And every time you take any kind of medication or have some kind of toxicity, even now with glyphosate, that is basically Roundup, a chemical that America has used to spray onto wheat to help it to dry faster. And a lot of people believe that they are gluten intolerant, but in actual fact, they're glyphosate intolerant. Because this chemical and other chemicals like drugs and medications destroy the lining of your gut. Now, this is major because most people, when they take a drug, let's say a headache tablet, and they think to themselves, oh, it's just a headache. It's just a once a week little tiny headache tablet that I got from the over-the-counter. Well, that's still a drug. It's still destroying the microbiome. It's still actually changing, the flora and fauna within the gut, and it's poking holes basically in the stomach lining. And this means that you probably have leaky gut syndrome and you don't even realize it. Why is that important? Well, imagine if the lining of your gut has holes in it. Imagine now that all this good money that you spent on nutrition and organic food perhaps, or biodynamic food if we want to go next level, because the nutrition comes from the soil. Now you're eating that or consuming it, but it's actually not even penetrating. You're not assimilating that quality nutrition. Wow. You could just be peeing that nutrition out because you may have leaky gut syndrome and not realize it. Now, I do like to teach people how to heal and seal the gut and how to actually restore nervous system balance. I'm telling you about the nervous system now because after the second brain, we actually should acknowledge the actual brain, which is the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves that branch off that, the nervous system. And I've been a massive chiropractic advocate for almost 3 decades now. I've been getting adjusted and getting checked weekly by chiropractors probably for about, 28 years. And I will absolutely say emphatically that one of the reasons I do not age as much as the average person is because I'm avoiding drugs and medication where possible. And if I have to have it, I will get the body back to balance immediately. And I'm restoring clear communication from brain to body through chiropractic on a regular basis. I'm not waiting for a symptom to occur. I'm making sure that my body is functioning optimally, that there are no distorted signals from brain to body. And that is what chiropractors do. But don't get me wrong, there's good and bad in every profession. And some chiropractors are practicing with just a musculoskeletal approach, where they're literally like manipulative therapists. But not all chiropractors are like this. Some are very good and they are very holistic in their approach. Having said that, there's different strokes for different folks. And some chiropractors, even if they're practicing like manipulative therapists, are still getting results, which is incredible. If you think about the first chiropractic that was ever given, it was given to a man who had lost his hearing. And after a chiropractic adjustment, yes, he was working under a wagon. His name was, I've forgotten his name because his boss's name was D.D. Palmer, Daniel David Palmer. And the janitor, Harvey Lillard, that was his name. He was working under the wagon, he heard a pop, and shortly after his hearing was gone. But Palmer had said to him, "Let me adjust you." And he removed the nervous system interference through scientific alignment of the spine, because that's what he was studying. And basically his hearing was restored. Yet somewhere along the line, we did misunderstand that chiropractic was about just headaches and back pain. However, that's all they got good research for. So understand that chiropractic is about so much more. It's about optimal function, it's about optimal neurological communication, and it's about restoring the cell's reproduction in an optimal way. So take note of those two things. And now I want you to understand the actual paradigm shift and where we have been actually conditioned and brainwashed to believe that we need to be divided, that we need to be, I guess, in a state of choice, this or that, around both, because we actually need both. We just need to use them in different ways. And so my aim is to heal the divide, which is a huge responsibility, if you like. And that is to make sure that the allopathic model and the wellness model will eventually come together. Now, this divide has come from me studying health history, but I'm not sure if you realize that there was a time where cigarettes were deemed healthy to women. They were sold in advertising campaigns that if you smoked cigarettes, that it was a healthy thing to do. So let me take you back to a story about a man called Edward L. Bernays. And Edward L. Bernays was actually the nephew of the psychiatrist Sigmund Freud. You may have heard of him. And he said to Freud, "Give me your research papers about psychology and how to manipulate the human brain," basically, because he had an assignment given to him by the government. And that assignment was to sell World War I to the public. Now, this is history. You can look it up. It's quite fascinating. But in this first task, That was what he needed to do as a PR assignment. And so Freud sent him his papers, and he sent back to Freud a box of cigars to thank him. And so his first task was not PR, it was propaganda. And after this, his second task was so successful in the first task that he got asked to sell the cigarettes to women. And from then on, the mission of this exercise was to create a population of people who were consumers, who would consume everything that they thought they needed but didn't need, in the hope that they would become docile and thus happy in this consumerism. And so I want you to look now at who's really to profit from you being sick. Think about it. There's no money to be made when you're well. And it's easier to stay well than to get well. And there's something called iatrogenesis. And iatrogenesis is the leading cause of death, or one of the leading causes of death in the modern world. Most people would think it's heart disease, cancer. And it's actually something that's been swept under the rug for absolute decades. That we know that, well, you're probably thinking right now, what is iatrogenesis? Why don't I know it? It's a fancy word. And that's because not everybody wants to talk about hospital error and medical error. We're only human. And so there are mistakes that are happening in hospitals and at doctors' practices because the right drugs were given at the wrong time, or the wrong drugs were given at the right time. And so, again, the notion of this is to understand that this should give you so much inspiration to be proactive, because even with the best drugs, the best doctors, the best hospitals, the best surgeons, there's still something called iatrogenesis, that when you, God forbid, land up in the hands of one of those people, there's still a very large chance and a risk that you may not make it. So right now, this is your most important calling with this information, to take charge of your own health, to be proactive, to understand who's profiting from selling sickness, and to finally be empowered into filling your wellness cup every single day. We are now bombarded with toxicity coming from physical, chemical, emotional, and even environmental toxic stressors. And the best thing you can do right now is to be as adaptive as possible. Some things we cannot control. The way our food is farmed, what they're spraying in the sky, the chemicals and the pollution around us. We also have, radiation coming from everywhere with electromagnetic fields. So can we change that? Maybe not. But what you can do is learn how to function optimally and become so adaptive that it doesn't matter what comes your way. Just like if you're all working in an office, or you're all living in a house and one person gets sick and the other one doesn't. The person who doesn't is the one who is the most adaptive. Now, the last thing I want to share with you is the mindset that comes with this. And it's in my favorite chapter of the book, Connected, that paradigm shift in how we view health. And it's called Perception is Everything. And I invite you to either listen to the book because it's on Audible, get some coaching with me, or just read the book instead of looking at your technology before bed. Start to allow those hormones to synchronize with the lunar cycle and get better quality sleep. And so turn off the tech, read a book. Now, how we come into this world says everything about who we are. It was literally from your birth or beyond. I wrote about this in my second book about the modern day mother, and it was about birthing and parenting from womb to one. I landed up in a show on 60 Minutes in Australia, which I collaborated with 60 Minutes in America about this. And when the team at 60 Minutes asked me to talk about what's called attachment parenting, I was reluctant at first because it's a sensationalist show, but I asked them if they would keep me in good company, then I would agree to do it. And I helped produce the segment. It was with Dr. Bill Sears, who was a pediatrician and an expert in attachment parenting with 40 years experience at the time, and Professor James McKenna, who was a PhD sleep scientist. And together with this information that we shared, we got to talk about how when you don't leave your child or baby to cry themselves to sleep, what that does to the neurological wiring of the human brain. Now, if we can prevent a better world through correct wiring right from birth or beyond, we will see a lot of better humans, emotional stability, and better health and immunity, because it actually stems right from birth. There's so much intervention with birth right now, and believe you me, I understand sometimes it is necessary with life or death, especially with emergency cesareans. But there is a lot of elective cesareans and people who are electing not to have a vaginal birth. Why is this important? Well, when you pass through the birthing canal, lots of things happen. But two of these things are that the baby or the human is ready to, release all of that tension as they're squeezing every single muscle inside the womb and pushing through, just like the mother is pushing. And a contraction is actually like a coffee plunger. And so rather than you thinking that the vaginal canal is closing, it's opening as the contractions come from sort of the top, and like a coffee plunger pushing that baby down as the mother and baby together squeeze and come out. But in an elective cesarean or even an emergency cesarean, the baby is just cut open from the roof of the car and just comes out floppy. There's two problems with that. They didn't get a chance to release their tension. There's a lot of science about how babies who have come through, a cesarean or C-section have had some kind of attention deficit disorder, ADD or ADHD. Now, there are things that we can do to help that child through it. But if we don't understand this from the get-go, we have humans coming into the world already with challenges. And one of the other challenges is that not passing through the vaginal canal means that they don't get to swallow a huge gulp of prebiotics. And that's what they have as they're passing through. So you'll see a lot of these C-section babies who have sadly developed jaundice and things like that. So, imperatively, it's important to encourage breastfeeding. There are a lot of sleep training books that, encourage pumping, and they encourage bottle feeding. And it came about at a time where we were detached in our parenting styles, where we wanted women's liberation and the ability for women to also earn and go to work. But the issue with this is that the oxytocin isn't released in a way that mother and child are designed to behave. And that oxytocin and that touch and that cross-patterning of the brain as the mother looks with the baby with eye contact on one side and then swaps to the other breast and looks at the baby with the eye contact from the other side. That is neurological development that's imperative. So even if, and this is a sensitive subject for women who haven't been able to breastfeed, and I'm really sorry that may have caused some kind of feeling that is less than empowered. Because it's, a woman's choice, but it's also sometimes out of her control that's happened because we don't have enough information, because we don't have enough support, because we're not all sitting under trees, talking to our mothers and sisters and, cousins. And instead we're covering the breastfeeding act with blankets over the baby's head and not really talking about it in the modern world, right? And so rather than it being just normal behavior, we've sexualized it. We've taken it out of context. And what I find really fascinating is that when that female fetus is being developed inside the womb, those breast, organs, if you like, the tissue starts from immune cells. And so how did we get so far into viewing this out of context in any other way other than being so imperative to allow the mother and baby to bond that way? Now, we could go down a whole rabbit hole about, how breast milk isn't just food. And I'd love to, but it's all in my book, The Modern Day Mother. However, what I will say is that when you've not done these practices of being attached to your child, like breastfeeding or at least bottle feeding, holding them instead of putting them in the pram and letting them feed themselves and exhaustingly holding that bottle by themselves from such a young age, not having that neurological development with the cross-patterning that I was talking about, it really does set up a different immune system for the baby and also their EQ or their emotional intelligence. Because despite what people say with, this attachment parenting, they're going to be so attached to you, they need you. The science shows that it does the exact opposite. That they get the emotional refuel from practices like safe co-sleeping, like baby wearing, like breast rearing, and not allowing that baby to cry themselves to sleep in cry it out barbaric methods. But what actually happens is you create a very safe space for that child to understand that, hey, we do live in a benign world, that people can be trusted. And to trust, that comes from, the main caregiver, the parent. And so this is going to impact on your overall health, your emotional health, and your actual physical health. So if you are someone that knows someone that is a new parent, this is crucial information moving forward. This is crucial to set up absolute optimal health right from the get-go. So I hope that information has been helpful to you. And if you weren't attachment parented, you may recognize some kind of emotional issues that may have stemmed as a result from that kind of parenting. And that's because even though we know that we've evolved and we're safe and, my parent let me cry myself to sleep, what has happened was it set up some kind of abandonment issues, some kind of anxiety around relationships that you don't even realize that you are dealing with right now. And I got all of my research from PhD scientist and somebody else called Margot Sunderland in a book called not Attachment Parenting, Science of Parenting. The Science of Parenting. Go look it up if you want to. But the main thing to remember right now is that the human brain is in three parts: rational, mammalian, and reptilian parts of the brain, and they do not fully integrate and become one brain until about the age of 5 or 7. And that is why there's that saying, show me the boy until he is 7 and I'll show you the man. Because there is wiring that is occurring. There is neurological wiring that is occurring from womb until 7. And if you continue to let that child cry themselves to sleep and don't attend to them with rocking, which helps them to develop their vestibular system, with touch, go to your baby a million times, show them that we live in this benign world, and then allow them to develop their own emotional security and safety. Or have a look at the research by Professor James McKenna that shows that we're actually designed to co-sleep because there is mutual benefits for both parent and baby on the synchronization of heartbeats, breathing, and body temperature. That both parties only fall asleep when you synchronize your breathing, body temperature, and heartbeats. That is just astounding. And so this means that if that human brain hasn't fully developed and become one brain, that the baby is actually in fight or flight, a chronic state of stress and adrenals and cortisol just going through the roof as they're screaming for your attention. But you only walk into that room when they're screaming at from 0 to 100. You go in at 100 and you go, what do you want? And you've basically taught that baby that only when they scream to 100 is when you'll come. And so they are so fatigued and scared because even though we have now lived in safe houses far away from each other, their reptilian and mammalian parts of the brain, the primal parts of the brain go, it is too scary for me to keep crying. A big lion is going to come and eat me. And so therefore I'll feign death, F-E-I-G-N. And so you haven't taught your baby to self-settle. They're just feigning death like they do in the animal kingdom. They become a little bit emotionally unavailable. It's their safety mechanism. And this is why you'll see a lot of these children in shopping centers and so forth. They'll just drop to the floor and scream to 100 because you've taught them it's the only way to get attention. So take all of this in, go and research it further, but this is absolutely one way to keep you a lot more well and to age less. But this last chapter about perception is absolutely everything. And when you start to free your mind from generational trauma or from the thoughts that have been holding you back from being who you truly want to be in this world, in this lifetime that is so incredibly short because we don't know if we have tomorrow, then you are going to be starting to really free your body. Your cells are listening to everything, and the future of healing is frequency healing, quantum healing, and energy healing, because everything is energy. And the evidence of that is everyone has thought about someone at some point and then the phone has rung. Have you ever remembered that time? Like, I was just thinking of that person. They've either texted me or called me. How is that possible? You know, that's a whole nother podcast in itself. But I really hope that you've enjoyed all of this information. I hope that you are so inspired to do more and to perhaps just really be thought-provoked. If you have any questions or any comments about any of the notions that I've shared, please comment immediately, share this with someone, or just talk to me. Tell me what you think. I'm interested in having better quality conversations with you. I know I've shared so many basic things, but now it's time to really get deep. Thank you so much. This is Well to Do, your favorite podcast on holistic health.